Hear what's made our spring collection this 2013 with Richard and Judy on the Book Club podcast, exclusive to WHSmith.
This week's offering is Julia Gregson's Jasmine Nights.
She explained in her lightly accented voice, Welsh, Italian, it was hard to tell. Her name was Sabo Tarkan, and she was a last-minute replacement for a torch singer, and she hoped they wouldn't be disappointed. And then she threw a look in Dom's direction, or so he imagined, as if to say, you won't be.
Prepare to enter a world of destruction, deception, love and lies. And keep listening to hear how you can buy Jasmine Nights at half price.
Hello, I'm Julia Gregson, and I'm the author of Jasmine Nights.
Now, just before we dive into the pages of our latest offering, we would just like to say a massive thank you to everybody who's been in touch with us via Facebook.
Get great tips on how to write your own bestseller with exclusive content on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Richard and Judy Book Club.
Well, Jasmine Nights is a really heady mix, and it's not surprising because Julia Gregson, the author, is a foreign correspondent, a foreign journalist. She's been to all these wonderful, exotic places that she describes.
She's much travel, isn't she?
Yeah, and she makes Cairo and she makes Istanbul during the Second World War sound absolutely irresistible, full of sunshine, fantastic food, wine, no rationing. It must have been bliss out there.
And she also is able to describe the fighter pilot that's at the centre of the opening sort of romance with great detail, because her own father was a fighter pilot. He was in the Battle of Britain. He was one of the few, you know. He was shot down 3 times, and then he went on to have a very distinguished career, which is why she travelled the world. They never stayed more than 2 years in one spot. And all that experience she brings to the fore in the book, which makes it completely believable. You know, it really does feel almost like a private diary.
I also loved the description of what it was like to be part of ENSA, entertaining the troops out there.
Yeah.
These young, pretty women, you know, all out there having a great time, wonderful time, away from the privations and rationing of war in England, in these exotic and lovely places, and a lot of them being recruited as spies.
Yep. And interestingly, although we don't go there too much in the book, a lot of the young people who were in these ENSA touring parties, you know, out in the desert, in the jungles of Burma, all the rest of it, it ain't half hot mum sort of type territory, went on to have very distinguished careers, you know, in show business. It was a great training ground for many of them, and a succor to the troops.
From Julia Gregson to Rachel Joyce, get more great tips from our book club authors on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Richard and Judy Book Club.
I left school very young, typical of a lot of women of my generation. Nobody thought we had one girl at our school went to university in 10 years, and we thought she was the saddest swot we'd ever met. So I left school very young, and I did about 14 or 15 different jobs. And then when I wrote my first story, it was like all the lights came on. I thought, this is it. It didn't translate to thinking I was good at it. I thought, I'll never get bored of this, and I want to do it. It's a very clear moment for me. Actually, getting an agent was pretty exciting for me. And I had my manuscript. She just handed my manuscript to me and said, this is going to get published. And I remember just standing there, just literally hugging it like a newborn baby. It was very exciting. I have a room at the top of my house, and I shut the door, I turn off the Wi-Fi. I try not to answer any phone calls or do anything until I've done at least 2 or 3 hours a day. I've just learnt this is the only way to get things done, because I'm easily distracted. I've never thought about writing about myself, but when you think about your books, they're a patchwork sometimes of things that have happened to you, or, you know, it's never directly, but it's like using bits of your experience at times in your life when you've been most hurt or most happy or most in love, and it's very, very satisfying like that. Or it's like no experience gets lost. But write about myself, no thank you.
Jasmine Nights is, if you like, typical Julia. It's set in the most exotic and glamorous locations you can think. It's set in the war. It begins in 1942 when a young girl, half Welsh, half Turkish, with a glorious voice, is entertaining injured airman in a hospital in Suffolk. Now, she meets a man there who is a Dom, who eventually becomes her great love, if you like. But at the time, he's unhappy and unwilling, really, to pursue the relationship until his scars have healed, which they eventually do. But really, it's the story of Saba and the way she escapes her rather routine existence in Tiger Bay in Cardiff. Her father's Turkish, her mother's Welsh and rather downtrodden. Her father's quite sort of, not aggressive exactly, but he's very, very forceful. And he doesn't want his daughter to be a singer. And she runs away, basically, and she joins ENSA to entertain the troops. I loved the idea of Saba coming from Tiger Bay. It kind of reminded me of sort of someone like, say, Shirley Bassey.
Yes.
You know, because she was such sort of mixed race,
yes,
and this fantastic voice.
Yeah.
And was that sort of deliberate? Or?
Well, it was. It sort of grew to... I thought about Shirley Bassey, but not a lot, actually.
Yeah.
My original impetus for that was I went to this fabulous photographic exhibition in Tiger Bay. Well, they call it Cardiff Bay now. And it was Bert Lloyd, who was a famous picture post photographer. And it was done before the war. And it was so... There were like 57 different nationalities down there.
Gosh.
Hoagie Carmichael came to play. Amazing jazz people. There were jitterbug clubs. So
Yeah.
I just thought, what a fascinating area to write about.
Yeah.
And it was a sort of place a Welsh housewife would celebrate Eid or Ramadan, or, you know, it was a true example of multiculturalism. Basically, because everyone worked together, it was very organic, it wasn't forced on anyone. So I got inspired by that, but that was where that part started for me.
I mean, obviously you have been in the past, you're a journalist, basically.
Yes.
And very much a journalist, a foreign affairs journalist.
Yes.
So you know the exotic locations of which you write. And Saba, together with, I love her friends. I love the other girls.
The bad girl.
I know, bad girl. Yeah, I love the girls she meets in the in ENSA. But she is transported to Cairo,
yes,
and later to Istanbul.
Yeah.
And there's this wonderful sort of difference between how they're experiencing the war there,
yes,
and how they're experiencing it back in Britain.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Yes. I saw, obviously, when you're an ENSA singer, although you're aware of the war and they were very brave, you also exist in a kind of fantastic bubble of excitement. And for Saba, what interested me was it was an incredibly liberating time, as it was for many women in the war, as it was for my mother. My mother was one of those girls at Fighter Command who moved planes around.
Really, yeah.
And I'm not saying it was barrel load of laughs always, it was terrifying, but I think for many women it was very liberating, the war.
Do you think it's because for that generation they were living life very much on the edge? I mean, for example, Judy talks about life at home, but Britain had a home front, you know, the country was being bombed and attacked all the time.
Yeah.
And there were these extraordinary events going on around the globe, and these were young people, very young people out there.
Absolutely. I mean, Cairo was an Alexander. They called it the Paris of the East.
It sounds like it, the way you write about it.
Well, it was an amazing place because you had all these rather brave and, you know, young men out there. They all had pay packets to spend. And it was bizarre because the war was going on intensely in the desert. But in Cairo, there was barely a blackout, you know.
And also...
Although Alexandria was badly bombed, actually.
Right, but in Cairo, I mean, Saba talks about the food. I mean, the food and the light and the sunlight. And it just sounds like paradise, actually, the way you write about it.
Tremendously liberating for these girls. A, to be doing what they long to do, and to be given the chance, as we know, to practice something that you long to do every day, not to be in disgrace about it as she was
in
home.
Wales.
But there's
fantastic.
more. There's more. She becomes a spy.
She becomes a spy, as many singers and entertainers did.
Because they moved around so much, they could gather intelligence.
I mean, it was very interesting. In Cairo, on a houseboat, there was a belly dancer, and I don't think I can remember her name, but she had this, her sort of barge, or whatever you'd call it, was squeaking with bugs. She had all high-ranking German officers would go there. and there was a Syrian, Ashmahan, a Syrian singer, Josephine Baker did surveillance work.
Did she?
Edith Piaf was supposed to have done it.
Yeah.
I mean, they were perfect because they were very pretty girls, and it was completely natural for them to be, you know, at cocktail parties with high-ranking officers, and also to be travelling a lot, so it didn't seem suspicious.
What is it, do you think, psychologically, about being in the presence of a beautiful young woman that makes otherwise professional, steel-trap-mouthed men let their guard down? I mean, it happens in modern politics. Look at Vince Cable boasting to his girls from the Daily Telegraph. What is it that men fall for and leads them to disaster, do you think?
My mother used to talk about massive flattery. I mean, that will work every time. If you sit next, being a good listener is... Most people are not listened to, are they?
But also, I would have thought the fact that the men simply underestimate them.
Absolutely.
There's the flattery, i.e. this young, attractive girl is being extremely interested in me, and of course she is, because I'm a really interesting person.
Yes, of course. Isn't that...
But how on earth could she possibly be threatening in any sense, because she's just a gorgeous girl?
Yeah, but the other thing I think is, and this was something I tried very hard to understand in the book, was the power of singers is extraordinary. There's an extra sort of sexuality and power about singers, because they're telling you about sort of emotions that you can't even get to half the time yourself,
which,
you know.
Which most of us can't do, getting out there in front of an audience, entertaining them,
yeah,
moving
it's brave,
them.
isn't it?
And then they come off stage and sit with you, and
the
glamour is still radiating off them.
It's like an ascended being, isn't it? Someone who has the kind of guts
to do what we can't do.
To do that really very exposing thing, which is to sing in public.
I must ask you a personal question. Is the word Jasmine in the title, does that allude to the fact that the very first time you were kissed as a young girl, you were in a jasmine-scented garden?
How did you know that?
It's in the back of the book for the question and answers.
It is true, actually.
I know, but is that why it's in the title? Is it just an allusion to it?
I think it was subconscious, actually.
I think it was.
Yeah, but also jasmine is the flower of love in Egypt. You know, people give garlands of jasmine to...
the reason you were in a jasmine-scented garden is because your father was RAF, was he?
He was sent to... I spent 2 years in Cyprus as a child. It had a big effect on me. I loved it, and I think this book was partly an attempt to remember those times.
Well, it's glorious. It really is so evocative, and it makes me want to go immediately.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Do you, I mean, you don't then long to live out there yourself? Are you sort of happy?
No, I love living in England. I've been an expatriate all my life. My father moved every 2 years.
Right.
And I've lived in Australia, in America, in New York, and coming back was such a relief to me. I understood the jokes, the subtext. I like grey weather. There's something about being in England that I love. But having said that, I need to get away.
Yeah. Well,
but actually, it was partly this book was, although it's not about my father, it was very much an attempt to understand my father and my parents as well.
Because you believe your father did a bit of intelligence work?
Yeah, but he was also a Battle Britain pilot who was shot down 3 times before he was 23.
Like Dom.
And when he died, I realised we'd hardly ever had, partly his choice, we'd never been there at all, really, except in the most facetious way, I would say.
Yes, they don't talk about it, do they?
Didn't want to talk about it.
Obviously, he's clearly survived the war, but was he taken prisoner or was he shot down over?
No, he was shot down, and the third time he was 23, and he hung in a tree on fire for 20 minutes. He was treated by Macindoe, the plastic surgeon.
The burns man.
So, in a way, Dom absolutely isn't my father. It's not like that, is it?
But the inspiration is
But it was a way of understanding my parents, who'd made light of everything in our childhood. And when they died, you suddenly thought, hang on, I sort of put a lot of things together.
Yes.
How did he never tell
lives?
us about that?
Yeah.
Well, you say that despite being a home bird, you like to travel, and you've taken us with you on this. It really is very evocative.
Thank you
terrific.
so much.
One could be there. Jasmine Nights, Judy Gregson.
Now here's your chance to get money off more great reads with the Richard and Judy Book Club podcast, exclusive to WHSmith. Check out the Richard and Judy collection and get any of the titles for half price with our special code. Just quote 35 10 10 55. That's 35 10 10 55 at the tills. The code's also on your screen now. This offer entitles you to purchase one of the Richard and Judy Book Club titles for half the RRP. Subject to availability, cannot be used in conjunction with any other promotional voucher. No cash alternative.
Next time on the Richard and Judy Book Club, exclusive to WHSmith.
A debut novel, and that means a debut on the Richard and Judy Book Club for David Mark.
Can't wait to meet him, and he takes us to Hull.
More than just a book club. Richard and Judy, exclusive to WHSmith. Check out whsmith.co.uk/Richard and Judy.